Peace and love, good people. Peace and love. I hope you are doing well. I was ruminating on the aspect of African cosmology, and it's a principle, I guess I could say, that is very interesting to me and very close to me. And so I wanted to share some thoughts that I had been sitting with and meditating on earlier today, and just kind of hover over and maybe shed some light, perhaps, on some foundations that I find to be of significance during this time as far as cosmically. We are currently in the season of Leo, right? The constellation Leo, that's where the sun resides right now. And it's a very powerful and dynamic time on an energetic level, as far as frequency, as far as spirit, as far as nature, what the elements are saying to us at this time, how the world is speaking at this particular time as it sits in Leo, as our sun sits in the constellation of Leo. And this is significant to me because I happen to have been chosen to be born in this particular season. That represents a lot of things that I want to tap into with you. Now, Leo is a very powerful time cosmically, spiritually, and energetically, right? When we think about Leo, we think about the lion. That's where it gets its name from, right? In the heavens, the constellation has long been viewed by our ancestors as having taken the form of the mighty lion, right? And there's so many things that we can pull from that, just as far as imagery and conceptually. When we think about the lion and all of the things that it represents, it's very, very interesting. The constellation of Leo, right? I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but the Great Sphinx, as it's called, but whose original name is Heru Emhaket, was built so that it is aligned with the constellation Leo. And Heru is a name of a deity or an energy that is known to the ancient African world that we will get into a little bit later. But firstly, I guess I wanted to speak on the fact that, or just highlight the fact rather, that, what we call or refer to as astrology today is actually an African sacred science, okay? And it is one that spans thousands and thousands and thousands of years, you guys, okay? It's absolutely beautiful. Our ancestors were attuned to nature and attuned to the unique and vital language that nature touches, speaks through, and transcends, okay? And I think it's important that our culture tap in, into these spiritual expressions. We've been indoctrinated into so many different systems and have been shaped by all of the high and low tides of history. Let's just put it that way, right? And some of it has been, taken in by us and utilized for good purposes. And of course, a lot of it has been nothing but accumulated detritus, over the centuries that we have had it. But nonetheless, they are systems that have worked for us to one capacity or another. Our history is a very complicated one with the various systems that have been inculcated into us over the centuries. And that is whether by choice or by force, right? As we know, both have existed within the dynamics of our history. But either way, I think that one of the most devastating results that we faced as a collective throughout the diaspora, if there have been any losses to account for, I would say one of the most devastating ones has been the disconnection and severance from our ancestral knowledge and connection to the universe and how we uniquely communicated with the elements or the gods, or whatever it is that you would like to refer to them as, Orisha or Neter, or whatever name you give them. Our unique divine language and expression and communication with that energy. I think that's probably the most devastating that we have lost. Basically we lost what was made uniquely in our image, what spoke uniquely to our people. Okay. Yet all of the known world as we know it today has been civilized because of the foundation that our unique African expression had founded. Because all concepts of spiritual intelligence or knowing are based in the African cosmology. Now, the concept of what we know to be astrology is also rooted in African cosmology. The concept of the 12 houses of astrology come from ancient Kemet and ancient Kush, right? It is these great ancestors who formulated the basis of what we now know today to be astrology and the 12 houses and what represents, these houses and all of that, right? Now, the 12 houses isn't anything spooky. Astrology isn't anything, kind of like, random and kind of disparate in its concept. No, it's very, very, very methodical, very scientific, and I would even say it is alchemic. Okay, its uses and the properties of those uses. Now, the 12 houses pretty much represent, one's complete being. If you just look at it as a body. So what the ancestors were doing was basically conjoining the human life with the cosmic life. They were looking at the cosmos as a representation or as a spiritual form of what we were on earth, so that the heavens and the earth were one. They worked in tandem. Even though they were on, I guess one would use the word opposite planes, they were in fact mirrors of each other. I know you guys know the term as above, so below, right? That is the African cosmology. Nothing operates disparately or separately. Everything operates in oneness. That is the worldview. So if we think about the 12 houses and what I said earlier, that it represents the complete being or the stages of being in one's life, the stages of nature and life itself, we can look at it in totality, right? The stages of being and becoming in one's life cycle. We can look at the idea of conception, looking at life in these 12 stages, a process that begins at conception and death and rebirth, right? Now, as far as Leo season is concerned, this particular season is but a representation of one stage within that cycle, right? In you. So Leo isn't only happening in you. Leo is happening in nature, in everything around you as well at this particular time that the sun is sitting in this constellation, right? Now, Leo governs a lot of powerful, powerful things and qualities. Leo governs the self. It's the house of the self, the house of identity, power, creativity. It is also the house of children, right? Vitality, revitalization, expression, spiritual oneness, leadership, authority, and so many other beautiful things. Now, Leo directs us. When we look at these particular concepts, what we can draw from that on an energetic and spiritual level is that the house of Leo directs us to build ourselves in order to build the community. So even though this house rules and governs the self, and we think about leadership and authority, right? It isn't a solitary sign. It's about the upholding and the building of oneself in order to feed and pour back in to the community, which is the world around you and nature and everything that you are in communion with, right? So while Leo governs leadership and the self, it also works in harmony with its opposite sign, which is Aquarius, right? And Aquarius governs the collective, right? Aquarius governs the collaborative expression, defying norms in order to usher in the new, right? So we think about these two opposite signs working hand in hand with each other. So while we are in Leo, we are directly opposite to the constellation of Aquarius, right? And that's also its own energy that is pouring into us at this time. That provides a balance, right? So you have the self in Leo, and then you have the spirit of collaboration and harmony with the collective, the larger collective in Aquarius. So these two things are operating simultaneously. Now, Leo also rules the element of fire. That is the element that is in charge of Leo. And what represents Leo on a planetary level is the sun. The sun rules Leo. So when we think about the sun, we think about life-giving principles, life-sustaining energy, life-enforcing energy, right? The sun is the ultimate creator, you guys, right? The ultimate light. And the ancestors, were attuned to this. You know what I'm saying? They peeped game, right? And so they collected their data and they said, you know what? Let's anthropomorphize this ideology. Let's turn it into the sun, the representation of a sun, and a sun, S-O-N. Let's take the S-U-N and put it into an S-O-N. And herein ushers in the concept of the Son of God. Now, Heru is the representation of the divine birthright of the sun. Heru is an ancient African deity in Kemet who represents this. And he comes about via the union of the African man and woman, right? The original Trinity is the African man, woman, and child. Isn't that beautiful? It is through the union of African man and woman that life is had, that balance is given to the world. And that is what Heru, this beautiful African deity, represents. Heru is the child of that union. And so with that, he represents the seed. He represents the fruit, the future, destiny, and the power and authority of one's life. He also represents the continuance of legacy, the continuance of the ancestral line, right? Isn't that what our children represent to us? Isn't that what we represent as children of our parents, children of our grandparents? The continuance of their lives, the continuance of their legacy, their bloodline, their wishes, the culmination of their hopes and dreams. It's the same thing. This is what we're dealing with when we're talking about the great African king Heru. This great elder Heru rules the house of Leo in the ancient Kemetic system. Now, a little bit of backstory for anybody who isn't familiar. Heru was the avenger of his father's killer, who was known as Set. And the duality of Osiris and Set can be found in the Cain and Abel story as well. There's a lot of things that we can pull from that many of you may be familiar with. As far as modern religion is concerned, you'd be quite surprised to know that they all have their start within the African cosmology. But yes, Heru was the avenger of his father's killer, who I said was Set. His father is Osar, who is known as Osiris to the Greeks. Heru came to bring light to the world and restore balance through his leadership and the uprightness of character in his father's image, right? And let's not also forget the queen mother, or Set. That was his mother, who was also known as Isis to the Greeks, as some of you may be familiar with. It was via her courage and her action to gather the scattered pieces of her slain husband's body, put him back together, and conceive Heru, the holy child. I'm sure I'm awakening a little bit of a palate within you, right? Some familiarity, but trust me, this is thousands and thousands and thousands of years before anything known as organized religion came to be. I'm also sure that you guys, some of you may have heard of the Eye of Horus, right? Well, Horus is the Greek name for Heru, the African god. So that it should be called the Eye of Heru, right? Now, the eye that they are referring to is Heru's left eye, right? Which is governed by the moon. And his right eye is known as the eye of Ra, which is governed by the sun. I mean, isn't it just beautiful just thinking about the mentality that was working with our ancestors at that time, and how all of it brings into focus an ideology and a level of culture that sustained countless generations for millennia and then some? This is what we are a part of. And this is what we should reintroduce our understanding to as Black people. So that in you understanding and knowing something, like the fact that you are standing right now in this moment underneath the constellation Leo that is governed by this African deity Heru that is millennia and millennia and millennia old, right? This is an energetic frequency you can tap into, that you can meditate on and discover your oneness with your own leadership and the qualities that you possess. We can begin meditating on this particular season and asking ourselves, what are we doing with our authority? Is it within harmony of our lives? Are we overindulging in the use of our power? Are we too timid about our power? Have we lit the fire, or have we fanned out the flame? These are the type of things energetically we can look to as far as the frequency of the Leo season. And don't think of it singularly, right? Leo is in everybody. Everybody possesses Leo energy, even though, let's say, your particular sun sign may not be in Leo, right? You aren't born under the constellation of Leo, but Leo exists in everyone. Leo exists in everybody's birth chart. I'd also recommend you guys find out about your birth chart and see where Leo falls for you particularly, because it's different for everyone. Some of you who don't have a Leo sun may very well have a Leo moon, right? Or wherever Leo falls in your chart, it may have a planet in there. What does that planet mean? And how does it affect your house of Leo? You'd be very surprised how these things play a role in your life. So I gave you an ancient African example of how the house of Leo has been represented as far as the people of Kemet and Kush. I told you about Heru Hemhaket, right? Otherwise known as the Great Sphinx, and how he is positioned with the constellation Leo, right? So that the Heru Hemhaket is a representation of the Leo. And that can even be broken down because, of course, the Great Sphinx has a human head and a lion's body. Some people interpret that as overcoming the lower self or the lower vibration, right? A lot of people also consider that the balancing of the animal nature and the human nature. I kind of look at it as a conceptualization of the oneness of one's power, or the unification of man and nature under God, under the universe, or whatever it is that one would like to refer to that divine presence as, right? The communion of nature and all things within us, and us within nature and all things. So yeah, the Heru Hemhaket is a very beautiful symbol and representation of African divinity, spirituality, and intelligence at its highest. And the fact that it is within the language of Leo, or giving salutation to Leo energy, is a very, very powerful thing, right? Another example, an expression of Leo's role in nature, and as far as its African spiritual and energetic system, also includes the god Ogun, right? Some people may be very familiar with that, right, throughout the diaspora. Ogun is a very huge principle and concept within the African cosmology. Now, Ogu originates we go from North Africa, East Africa, into the Western African terrain. This is where Ogu originates. He is from the Yoruba tradition in what is present day Nigeria, Benin, Togo, you know what I'm saying? That particular region, or as it was once known as the Kingdom of Dahomey. Ogu can also be found in Haiti, where my family is from, Cuba, Brazil, He can be found throughout the diaspora, okay? Being conjured, being prayed to, being divined. Ogu is a very special deity for me. In fact, the people of Haiti refer to him as Papa Ogu, right? So that there is a loving, affectionate way that we call to him. Ogu carries a lot of traits and similarities to that can be found in Heru. For example, in Haiti, Ogu is celebrated at the start of Leo season. Okay? Ogu represents fire, war, overcoming challenges and obstacles, protection, work, healing, justice, blood, iron, will, masculine energy, civilization, virility, to name a few. He is the supreme authority in African cosmology. Now, you can see why the Leo season, can be seen and has long been viewed and represented as a pivotal point of understanding nature in one's spiritual journey and the importance of incorporating these principles within one's life. You know what I'm saying? I don't know whose life can go without the need for justice or healing or for one to have the ability to overcome challenges, for one to have a level of endurance and tenacity in their pursuits. All of that is in the language of leadership, right? That's the encompassing role of the ability to lead one's life, to lead one's family, and then hence to lead one's people. And to also be led by, righteous direction as well. So that, to ruminate within this time period, where the sun is sitting in the constellation of Leo, where are we called to examine, these traits and characteristics within our lives? How can we better communicate with that part of ourselves, that is housed within this particular sacred season, and what it means for our lives and the things that we are pursuing, the things that we are thinking about, the things that we want to materialize in the future, right? Because I said Heru, getting back to him, represents the seed, the materialization and the fruition of that seed, right? The claiming of one's destiny, the becoming. The becoming is very important because that becoming insinuates newness, but we are also carrying the past, right? The mother and the father creates the child. So it's a continuance of legacy, and it's the realizing of one's own personal legacy in tandem. It's very beautiful cosmology. I love African spirituality. It's beautiful. And there's so much to speak about. We could go on and on for days. But also there's the numerological aspect that I'm also very much into. That is a part of the African science and spiritual worldview. Leo rules the number 1. That is Leo's number, right? And when we think about the number 1, I'm sure myriad things pop into your mind, right? We think about the number 1. Of course, we are thinking about things primary. We think about the source, right? The concept of one God may pop into your mind, right? Oneness. There goes that word again, right? So that numerologically, these things also have a language, and you can find similar correlations to be made within those characteristics as well to the energy of Leo. I'm looking into, my own energy field all the time. And as I enter into a new cycle of my life, I'm taking on this energy and, seeing the ways in which I can better express, my power, my abilities. Leo governs expression, as we spoke about earlier, and all of the beautiful qualities and traits, that I can harness within this particular season, and under this constellation that can mobilize and actualize and materialize the things that I am looking to do, and within the things I'm looking to call forward, right? And I invite you all to do that for yourselves as well. Culturally speaking, I think it's much needed for our people. No matter your background or creed or preference, there is something to learn within nature, whether it is, you practicing Christianity or Vodou or Islam or Buddhism or any other practice, right? There is something always to be had and learned from nature. And that is what the African worldview has bestowed upon us since before time was called time. You feel me? Anyway, that's it for me for now. Black. No sugar, please.